Still not hear me? I'm
Oh, bam, got it.
okay.
Okay,
Good.
see, I didn't even change anything. It just happens sometimes like
Yeah.
that.
All
This
right.
happened one time before.
Good.
Okay,
Good. Great.
Arthur, good to see. I was just telling people that you're like a role model for me,
Oh,
and
really?
yeah, yeah, because like I always had an impression like, hey, after 40, you're pretty much done unless you're like using a whole bunch of like secret supplements, in terms of maintaining a physique. And obviously, you're in your 60s, and in my opinion, even looking better than I am at 37. And you're a role model for me, man. That you're still able to hold together and also just be like very aesthetically appealing in terms of the physique,
Thank
and also just not have to be on like 50 different medical drugs by the time you're 60, like the bulk majority of males find themselves in as well. So I think you're a great example of kind of how to go on an honest journey of health and wellness, which isn't easy. It's not easy. I'm not selling it like, hey, it's this quick trick or whatever. So I just wanted to invite you on the show just to kind of talk about your experience.
you.
And also, I'm sure a lot of the listeners would also be able to pick a lot of parts of the story that they could relate to, and then hopefully have like an honest answer of how to overcome like a certain challenge. Because I know it hasn't been an easy road for you. I'll let you explain how that is. But with the shoulder injuries and also the stenosis in the low back and everything, it just makes working out fairly annoying into older age, and in fact kind of scary sometimes. And just like that's one of the things that kind of keeps a lot of men in their 40s and 50s and 60s out of the gym. They just don't want to get injured, and of course that makes sense. But then their body kind of accelerates the decay process because then they're not active at all and stuff of that sort. So I'm just going to try like a new template today, and in terms of the interview process, and then we'll kind of do that template first, and then just do a lot of random stuff, topics you want to cover and stuff of that sort towards the end. Um, but let's start with, I know you're not quite done with the program yet, but it's pretty close to being done. I think 2 or 3 weeks away or something.
That's right.
But we've finished the cutting phase. So we have two different phases in your program. The first one, and when you came to me, you're like already shredded, So I'm like, oh, you want to get even more shredded? So for the listeners, all the time when clients come in, I have them do like a 2 to 3 hour assessment. And in the assessment, he sent me his pictures and he's already like super shredded, even more ripped than I am. And then during our call together, he's like, oh, I want to get shredded. I'm like, dude, you're like already shredded. Let's do a lean bulk. But he talked me into getting even more ripped. And he surprised me with the after pictures as well. Not only did he get even more ripped, but he added like a decent amount of volume and density to his frame as well, which is kind of tough to do in your 40s and 50s, et cetera, et cetera. So let's start with, let's start with the assessment process. So first, what was your expectation in terms of going into like an online coaching program and stuff of that sort?
Well, the expectation process, it had me a little bit nervous. In fact, that's one of your questions on your questionnaire. If I feel nervous, but I feel excited, but a little bit nervous. And so that was the question I selected because I felt both of those things. Excited to start, nervous to start. Was very, very uncertain about remote coaching. Couldn't really, in my mind, figure out how that was going to work. I remember thinking a number of times, how is he going to properly assess me or properly coach me if he only sees me in photos and in videos? And then, of course, as the program evolved, all of those questions not only became answered, but ironed out very easily. So, as you know, I was following you for quite some time before I reached out to you. It was pre-pandemic that I discovered you, and just became entirely hooked on the whole process of all of your. In fact, that very first video of yours that I watched, I sent you a comment, and I was just blown away by your level of knowledge and your level of articulation to convey that knowledge. And so when I finally made the jump to reach out to you and tell you that I wanted an assessment, it really was an open ball. I think I even said that to you in the initial consultation. I said, I don't really know what's going to happen, but a long time ago, very good friend of mine, she's a woman that was much older than me. She told me this saying, and she said, when the pain of staying the same becomes greater then the pain and the fear of making a change, you'll find that you're able to make that change. And that is exactly where I was when I sent you that initial message. So hugely uncertain as to how it was going to go, but all I knew is that you were very smart, and I hadn't just discovered you. I'd been following you for a long time, so I knew that you knew what you were talking about. And so it was this enormous leap of trust and faith, and that's how I jumped in.
Okay, let's kind of let's break down your cutting phase
Sure.
first. So yours lasted for about like 5 months or so. Let's kind of break down month one. It doesn't have to be like exact details, but in general, like your experience with month one, some challenges you had, et cetera, et cetera.
So just before we actually started is when my shoulder injury just flared up like crazy. And my shoulders have been bugging me for a very long time, and I actually had a really massive rotator cuff tear in 2005. It took me 5 years to rehabilitate that tear because it was 50% partial thickness. Just before you and I started, it was acting up in a horrible way. And I thought, I can't believe this. What rotten timing. How could this happen? I've just paid this guy. I've signed on. What am I going to do? And so I was scared and a little bit upset as to how it was going to go. But uh, you taught me exercises that we could use that would get me around the shoulder injury. And then I was doing some rotator cuff strengthening on my own, and I was going for acupuncture. And then it was just this constant process of you and I checking in. You asking me, how's my shoulder? And then literally week by week, I would tell you where I was at with it. And it took a long time for it to start to stabilize and for it to start to heal. But when I really noticed that it was healing is when I felt that the first month started to sort of take off a bit more for me. So month one, the training was, I felt that I wasn't able to put into the training what was really required to make month one a success. And yet it turned out to be a far greater success than I could have imagined. And that was simply because we found ways to train around the pain, whereas before I was in so much pain, there was like, I was dropping this exercise and then I would drop back exercise. So no incline pressing, no decline pressing, no practically anything. All I was left with when you and I first started was I could do push-ups, and I was doing push-ups on tiny little med balls to try and create some instability so that that would remind me to use my scaps more and press from the center of my pecs more and less from my shoulders. But that was really all I could do. And then as you switched things up for me or said, let's try this exercise, let's try that exercise, things started to get better and better. And so for me, it was about shedding the fear and really trusting you and the direction in which you were leading me, and just the constant feedback that I gave you. So it was it was shaky for me month one. I was like really nervous as to like, are we going to have to stop? What really, that was the question that was on my mind almost every single day. And then I would say to myself, no, you're not going to stop. You're going to find a way because Eugene knows what to do. And you did. So month one started out shaky and just progressively got better from there.
Yeah, one of the biggest tips I have for people with a lot of aching joints, sometimes you do just have to take like a few months off from working out, from actually doing serious workouts rather, just to let the issue settle down, you know, and then you can kind of start from fresh there and then kind of maybe do some corrective exercises as well. But I think the most important thing, especially with coaching, is just to do like a thorough assessment, especially if people, just in general, but especially if people are coming in, like you're already coming in with a shoulder injury, some aching low back issues, et cetera, et cetera. And just to really identify at first what the pain triggers are, like outside of the gym, inside of the gym, because it adds up, you know, like, okay, your technique could be perfect inside of the gym, but then a person is moving around poorly, like outside of the gym, it adds up. And you can be, like, as McGill would say, picking the scab hundreds of times a day and keeping that tissue sensitized. So one of the best things I would recommend is always just, if you're under certain pain, write down all of your pain triggers. This includes in the gym and outside of the gym, and really evaluate, like, first, if you need, like, say inside of the gym, if you need those movements. So let's say your lower back is hurting. Do you really need a barbell deadlift off of the ground to build like a good physique if that's really your goal? You don't, you know? So you'd be like, okay, so if my lower back is hurting on there and I really don't need it, I should just probably abandon that exercise and find good substitutes that will get me from A to B in a much safer way and still allow me to accomplish like what I want to accomplish. And a lot of people get too fixated and stuck on just, I have to do this exercise. Like, I know your shoulder was bugging you in pull-ups, so we had you do like Brignoli pull downs for a while, which worked great, you know, and it still got the job done. And that's like a good substitute as well. I forgot exactly what other exercises we substituted for, but maybe you can touch on that. I forgot exactly.
Well, so certainly the Brignoli pull-in was a game changer. And strangely enough, all the many, many years that I've been working out, I never even heard of it, and so therefore had never done it. And then we started doing it, and I was able to pull without shoulder pain. And I thought, wow, this is great. And then as I became more confident, I was pulling heavier and heavier with that particular exercise. And I remember the call where I said to you, my lats look like bat wings now. They just like came out, and it was really amazing. And so we did that exercise. And we also did some supinated grip cable rows. And that was a great back exercise because I didn't feel my shoulder at all, period. And then as I got better and better at those two exercises, we were eventually able to add in a neutral grip pull up. And that was perfect. Like, it didn't hurt at all. And so by trying a couple of things and then seeing how I progressed through those exercises, then throwing in even more exercises, just sort of cautiously pushing the envelope, we were able to find exercises that not only I could do, but were carving out my physique in a way that I just had not anticipated.
I also found like one thing that works really well to prevent injuries is just having like a um, very good and strict mind muscle connection instead of staying away from just kind of throwing weights back and forth, and really kind of just basically following three principles that I covered with you many times. There are a few more, but the three main ones are just really feeling the tension in the muscle group you're trying to actually use. So like when you're doing like a bench press, you're actually feeling it in the chest, every single millimeter of the movement going, you know, all the way down at the bottom, all the way up and at the top, and not breaking that tension and not letting that tension kind of gravitate towards like your shoulder, your rotator cuff, for instance, or your tricep, et cetera, et cetera. And also just kind of having like a very slow eccentric, meaning like on the way down, a lot of people just generally throw the weight down. But if you have like a really slow eccentric, that will help make the exercise a lot safer because you have to be very focused as well. And obviously your mechanics have to be good and all that stuff and a few other details. But also it helps load the tissue a lot longer in each rep because obviously when you're pushing the weight up, you have gravity, you know, but when you're lowering the weight down, you have to kind of create that voluntary resistance to put the muscle under tension. And I feel also like another thing is people don't oftentimes fail at in the targeted muscle. So like the bench press is a common one. You see like on the last like rep or two, people like start distorting their whole entire body just to finish it and re-rack it. And then obviously, you know, the tension is you finish that rep, but remember you're trying to like build a good looking chest in that case. You're not trying to you're not trying to finish that repetition or move as much weight as possible. So whenever you're kind of distorting that body, the loads are being distributed to muscle groups you don't necessarily want to train that day. And it's being taken away from the muscle group you do want trained. And obviously, most likely, if you're distorting your body that way, it's really just taxing your joints, in particular your shoulder in that case, quite a bit. And also reinforcing those engrams of bad movement patterns. So you do them more times now under load, and it kind of reinforces those poor movement and postural patterns, which lead to arthritis and degeneration of the joints, and also just like in serious cases, injuries as well. So just some tips. And also, I know we experimented this a lot with you, but can you talk about like when we spoke about making kind of every exercise a core exercise in the sense of like bracing your core and how that actually helped with your shoulder and back as well?
Yeah, so actually, when you were just talking, I was jotting things down, and there are three things that I wrote down. Three things that you made me change that I had not been doing, and so the first change was in the program itself, and that was tempo, which you talked a little bit about. And I understood tempo, and I had done time under tension tempo training, but I'd never slowed down absolutely every single exercise of every single set to like a 3 second, in some cases 4 second eccentric. And what a difference that made in my pain threshold. I still don't understand why it made as much of a difference as it did, but slowing things, I would have thought the opposite, but slowing things down to the degree that you had me slow down took away a lot of my pain. The other thing that you did was what you were just talking about, is the micro movements. I didn't realize how much of a micro mover I was, and twisting and contorting and trying to get the weight up because I was probably too stubborn or too proud to lower the weight. And really, it's in those micro movements where all the pain starts to happen. And you will feel your shoulder, or you'll feel one of your sternal muscles, or you'll feel your back, or something is going to twinge and something's going to hurt you because you're squirming around and you're not just focusing on the primary mover. But the big thing, and from day one, from the very first time I tried it, was what you just asked me, and that was the core contraction, where you said, let's turn every single lift into a full body movement. And I'm like, okay, well, what is he talking about? And so as you elaborated, it became more clear. So, and I go through these cues every single time I pick up a dumbbell or I clench a bar, and that is to crush the bar and to compress, especially me, compress my rib cage, because I tend to flare the ribs, and that causes all kinds of issues that I wasn't aware of. Compress the ribs, activate your TVA and your obliques, which is very simple. You just pull your belly button to your spine and you're activated. Pack your shoulders, and then just really squeeze the hell out of your core when you're about to move the weight. And you do that for every single rep of every single exercise, every single time you go into the gym. And what a difference it made. And that was another really big reason why my shoulder started to heal as fast as it did, is because I was no longer requiring my shoulder to jump in and be recruited and to help in an exercise that really only the pecs should have been performing. So it was a very fast evolution of thought, and a couple of really super fast paradigm shifts. But those core contractions, I can't speak highly enough about them and all the differences they made in my ability to progress. Because for years and years and years, I've been lifting the same amount of weight and never understanding why, and just getting frustrated and upset. But since we started those three things, but most especially the core contractions, my progressions have been like just nothing short of show stopping. And I even said that to you one day. We were into the rep range where I was doing 2 sets of 8, and then increase the weight, 2 sets of 6, and then increase the weight, and 2 sets of 4. Wow, my strength, it just went through the ceiling. I couldn't believe it. And I just couldn't wait to go back to the gym and try it again, because I was like, well, what's going to happen today? And sure enough, the strength would go up. Maybe not by a lot. Maybe I was only putting on 2.5-pound plates on either side of the bar when I was doing my bench press, but a micro progression is still a progression,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's 2.5 pounds or something greater. And so for me, given the state I was in with my shoulder when we started, for me to be able to continuously add weight to the bar was just phenomenal. It was so encouraging. It made me want to try even harder, and I did. And the harder I tried, the better I got. And the better I got, the harder I tried. So those three things really changed my training life, and maybe my life period, because I started to develop faith in my ability to accomplish something I thought I was never going to be able to accomplish. So,
Yeah, that's the one thing that kind of sucks about lingering injuries or chronic pain that haven't quite evolved to a serious injury yet. It's just you kind of lose your confidence in your body. You're like, oh, if I'm going to do this, am I going to be hurting tomorrow? Or if I'm going to push it a little bit more today, am I going to be hurting for like a whole week or stuff of that sort? And it almost just kind of like ruins your entire experience in the gym. It should be like a time where it's like almost therapeutic, you know what I mean, and enjoyable. But now it's like almost like a dangerous situation, where you're kind of like on edge and you're like, well, shoot, like if I just lift this a little bit incorrectly, then, my back's going to be hurting all week long and I don't want that. So I'll just avoid it.
Yeah.
And eventually, um, unless people spend a lot of time educating themselves, which you could always become your own mechanic, but just be ready to, invest a lot of time in reading books on and from this topic on biomechanics, injury prevention and stuff like that, and actually implementing it. But if you just don't do that, I mean, your only other hope is just to really hire someone to help fast track the process for you, because it's not going to just like miraculously, like you're not going to miraculously figure out how to work out without back pain. It's like there's a lot that goes into it. Back pain is a very general umbrella term. There are many different types of low back pain. For example, some people have stenosis, some people have posterior disc bulge, some people have anterior disc bulge, some people have actual vertebral damage, some people have the facets are crashing into each other. You got to first know what kind of back pain you're dealing with to be able to appropriately work around it. But also, like another thing you mentioned that I kind of forgot a little bit is I do see people oftentimes just really overlooking the importance of negating micro movements in their lift. And they just, I did this for a bit as well, and they just overlook it like it's okay, like on a bench press, since we've been talking about that one so much. Just even horizontal movements, but under a lot of load, will create a lot of pressure on your joints. And of course, let's say you're hitting chest twice a week, 4 years later, all of a sudden your shoulders are worn out and you're like, hey, what's going on? I should be actually becoming healthier and more resilient. But it seems as time is going on and becoming less healthy and more brittle, so the gym is actually your enemy. And a good, I guess, what's the word? So you can get on your chiropractor's 401k plan, they have their office across the gym. They're like, hey, this gym is the client maker for me. I don't even have to advertise. They just go in there, injure themselves, and then they're my client for the rest of their life, because they never learned how to lift correctly anyway. So they just keep getting re-injured, needed to come in and see the chiropractor over and over again. Can you also explain, this is another thing, especially these days with like cell phones and stuff like that. I never carry my cell phone to the gym, or if I do, it's always on airplane mode. But to do all of the stuff you mentioned in terms of core bracing, be really in touch with your lifts, prevent micro movements, you just need to be really focused. And I feel that's a huge challenge for today's gym goers. Can you talk about like the importance of really staying focused, going over your reps even before you do them, going over having an internal audit in your mind while you're doing the reps? Because those are so important and just go overlooked very often, almost all the time, actually.
No, I agree. The only one time, the only time I would bring my phone onto the weight floor with me was when I was recording a video, so I could send you a video of my form. And it was in recording those videos that I saw how much micro moving I was doing. But if I wasn't on a video recording day of my exercises, then the phone stayed in the locker. And there actually is a lifestyle lesson that you did that you entitled Intensity, and it was about just that. It was about eliminating the distractions uh, during your session, so that when you went up onto the gym floor and you were doing your session, that's all you were thinking about. And that actually starts, for me anyway, it would start when I would get up in the morning and I would be having breakfast, and I carry a logbook with me of my exercises, and I log how much weight and for how many reps on any given day that I train. And so I would write down the exercises that I was going to be doing. Would write down what my target rep range was and what my target weight was, what I was hoping for. And then on the drive to the gym, I would be thinking about my lifts and how I was going to approach them. And by that, I mean reminding myself of the core contractions, reminding myself to eliminate the micro movement. For me, what I ended up doing is if I did catch myself in a micro movement, I would terminate the set, because it pretty much that spelled the end of the prime mover doing the job that I wanted it to do. And, I go to a big commercial gym and it's fairly busy. And so all the other people that were on their phones would always be sitting on the piece of equipment, and I don't know what they're doing, but they're staring down at their device when, I'm standing there and wanting to use that piece of equipment that they're using. And so I just started, politely, I would say it, but I would say to people, while you're just doing stuff on your phone, and I wouldn't even ask. I would just say, I'm going to jump in here and do a set. I said, my sets take 40 seconds.
Move
And
right there.
and most of the time it was a little embarrassing because sometimes they would just stand up and walk away as opposed to saying, okay, sure, no problem, jump on, and then they would go back on it. And so I realized that a lot of people aren't very comfortable with being approached in that fashion. But seriously, if you're going to go to the gym and you're going to bad enough that you're wasting your time, but if you're wasting other people's time, then somebody eventually is going to say something to you, and that somebody was me. And so I ensured that I got into a really focused mindset, and I stayed in that focused mindset. And I was very strict with my rest breaks in terms of not going over a rest break. And sometimes I would even short myself a little bit on a rest break. Sometimes I have a tendency to get a little bit hyper, and then I would have to like rein myself back and say, okay, wait a minute, this lift that you just performed is really taxing. It's really heavy. Give yourself the full amount of rest. But you must be constantly in the game of what you're doing and not texting or searching for a song or whatever. I don't even listen to music when I train. I'm just so in my head about what I'm doing, and all the inner talk about the cues, about crush the bar, pack your shoulders, compress your ribs, activate your TVA. Like that is just going on all the time. And I find that when you're running that program through your head, you can't really be listening to anything else. So for me, focus was such a big, important thing. And like I said, it started before I even left home for the gym. I would start in the morning and getting myself into that place.
Yeah, and that's huge. And for you guys listening to this, I know you're probably overlooking it, but dude, if you don't master that part, your workout intensity will be subpar. And of course, it depends on your goal, but if, being muscular and building an attractive physique is your goal, that's just not naturally how the human body looks. So you're really going to have to up that intensity gradually with good progressive overload. And to do that safely, you're going to have to do all the stuff you just mentioned to be able to, have enough stimulus every workout, and also just to be able to do it safely as well. Because the irony with weightlifting, the stronger you get, the more dangerous it becomes. So you have to already have those engrams in place, that mental game in place. So when you're getting up to those 100-pound dumbbell presses or whatever, all those things are automatic, and it's almost like done unconsciously at that point. You don't have to kind of keep rehearsing and stuff. All the perfect angles for your elbow, for your wrist, all the perfect angles, how to set up the bench, how to activate your core and turn even like a bench press into a total body exercise where you're incorporating your core, which is also like your glutes and your lats into the lift, et cetera, et cetera. It's not just like your rectus abdominis, the six-pack abs that are just your core. You got like a bunch of muscles working there to kind of help stabilize the spine, which inevitably helps stabilize your limbs as well, including your knees, ankles, neck, and shoulders. So you really just need to master that integration of the core muscles into the rest of your body, et cetera, et cetera. And you want to know a cheap biohack? Never have your cell phone on you in the gym, okay? I even have like an MP3 player still that I download songs manually onto just to use that as my music, for example. But yeah, like you, I'm kind of in the zone so much. Oftentimes I don't even hear the music. You know what I mean? I'm just completely unconscious to it. It's just like something running in the background. Another thing I found too is just wearing a baseball cap, like very low in the gym. So that way people don't talk to you randomly as well. And you're less likely to be distracted by the peripheries, like the TV and stuff like that, because it's kind of like you're one of those racehorses with those kind of blinders so they could look just straight ahead.
Definitely.
And it's huge, like mentally perceiving yourself doing the set successfully before you do it. Each angle, how many reps are you going to do? Which reps are you going to struggle on? How are you going to finish that last rep or two without having micro movements, et cetera, et cetera. And then when you're doing the set, all that internal auditing, all that internal talk needs to happen as well. Am I keeping my core engaged? Am I keeping the tension in the muscle I'm trying to keep the tension in? Is it going to my joints? Am I having micro movements? Once you're done, you're thinking about that set again, in between sets. You're not chatting. You're not checking someone's ass. You're not checking out the news. You're not doing a work email, which is the worst, especially for you managers and up. Do not turn on your phone. You're going to get work emails, and it's going to totally take your mind in another place, and your workout intensity is going to suck. And you're going to look like 95% of people that go to the gym. 95% of people that go to the gym every freaking day for even longer than you, they have to tell people they go to the gym for people to know they even work out. You can't even tell, because they're not on any kind of program. Their intensity sucks. They have the attention span of a goldfish, like 5 seconds after reset every time. And they're just wasting their time. And like you mentioned, hinted at as well, they're wasting other people's time too. Because I understand if you're there working out hard and focused, then take up all the machines you want. You're there, you're doing the right purpose. But if you're there on your cell phone, just like go into rest break, or just be outside or something like that. You're totally just wasting your time and everyone else's. So let's go down here. So month 1, I remember we didn't make like visually that great of progress because we're just really trying to correct your biomechanics, figure out movements that actually work for you and keep you pain free, teach you about like core integration. But I remember then month 2, like your body started, month 2 and 3, your body started visually transforming more as we kind of, healed the body and also built your confidence that, hey, you can work out pain free, so you can push it a little bit more. Can you kind of do an overview of month 2 and 3?
Yeah. So yes, month 2 and 3, you're right, is when the changes started to happen, and they were slow and they were gradual. And I think perhaps I was being a little impatient, and so you were, and truly that was the invaluable part about having you around, is that you were able to see the changes better than I was able to see the changes, and I guess because I was looking at myself every single day. But seriously, I think that those big 3 exercises from Stu McGill that you had me doing at the beginning of every single workout, that's when my back pain started to recede. And the more my back pain started to recede, the harder I was able to train, until I think it was well into month 3, where I was starting to record very low and occasional 0 out of 10 for a back pain score. So that was very, very encouraging. The changes that were becoming the most noticeable, of course, I remember telling you, is I'd like be able to see my serratus starting to pop out, and then eventually the external obliques and the internal obliques. My arms started to get like insanely vascular, and so there were changes that were happening in areas of my body that I wasn't anticipating. But because I was so obsessed with looking ripped in my abdominal region, I was a little bit dismissive of some of the other changes that were taking place. And so certainly that's the value of the progress photos, because if you're not taking progress photos and you just see yourself in the mirror every single day, you're not quite so likely to notice the changes. But if you have a progress shot that you can go back to and say, oh, this is what I looked like 4 weeks ago, this is what I looked like 6 weeks ago, then you really are struck by how your body is starting to change, and in what ways. And because fat loss is such a weird thing, like it doesn't really come off in one particular area. I gather it's coming off from everywhere, but there will be certain regions of your body where you're going to notice it more acutely than others. And so some of those body parts that I was talking about is where I was seeing my fat loss initially, and certainly the arms, and then the shoulders, and then finally the abs started to pop out, and then that center line down the pecs came. And when that day arrived, and that was towards the end of month 3, when that day arrived, I remember telling you, because I was quite excited about it. And I said, oh, so I've got this center line down my pecs. And then comes the center line down the abs. And I never ever seen that before. And that was coming out towards just at the last week of month 3. I started to see that center line going down the center of the abs. And of course, this is all because of caloric manipulation. But I really think it's important to do the progress shots, and it's very, very valuable and very, very helpful to have a coach like you, so you could help me see the things that I wasn't seeing, because I, in my mind, was sort of stuck on what had been driving me crazy for the last several years, including that little bit of pec droop that I had, which it just seemed impossible to correct. Now, that didn't really start to correct until the 4th month, but you just kept encouraging me to keep trying, and you said, it will get better. And then boom, just towards the very end of the program, like you can't even see it anymore. It's practically 0 now. So Yeah, the changes start for me, they started super gradual, but then once they started to accelerate and the changes became more and more evident and more pronounced. And when that starts happening, then, you get more and more excited and you want to go further. So,
I find two things kind of the health and wellness industry shuns is actually things I do with my clients all the time. And that's take their weight daily
yeah,
and progression pics. Because you hear in a lot of health professionals say, don't take your weight daily, you're going to get discouraged or stuff like that. Or it's going to create like an unhealthy relationship with your goal or whatever. But I disagree. I think it's only going to make you discouraged if you're on a shitty program that doesn't produce results and you don't see that number changing at all, then for sure you get discouraged. But analytics tracking happens by the top of any person in any industry. Business people always keep track of their finances, their productivity matrix. They look at it almost daily. I don't know, anyone really excelling in any industry has detailed analytics on their performance stats, how it's progressing. More importantly, like why you want to take your weight daily, in my opinion, first thing in the morning on an empty stomach, right after you go to the bathroom, ideally, is because for a few reasons. One, for the psychological reason of constantly being reminded of your goal and why it's important to you first thing in the morning, so it's at the top of mind. Because most people, it's easy to put your mental and physical health second, or a distant second, or a distant 100th in today's society. And a lot of people do it. That's why I know you're from Canada, but in America, 9 out of 10 American adults are metabolically unhealthy right now. 90%. So you forget about yourself, and it's easy to live a life of mental and physical pathology. Not easy in the sense that it's actually easy. It's actually very difficult and miserable, but easy to fall into that kind of swamp of pathology and stay stuck there and kind of sink deeper and deeper year after year. But more importantly, keep taking your weight first thing in the morning. If weight loss is your goal, for example, or weight gain as well, that's also important. It keeps your goal top of mind. Second, it gives you instant feedback, objective feedback on how your behavior impacts your weight. So let's say it was really good for 5 days, but on the weekend you go out for a few drinks. It was going down for 5 days, but on the weekend you go out for a few drinks and you wake up in the morning, it's like 2 pounds heavier. You're like, well, shit. So clearly drinking and eating all this kind of junk food on the weekend makes my weight go up.
yeah.
Like
Uh,
that's my goal. And well, what if I did that for 7 days instead of 5 days? My weight would probably keep going down. Yeah. Okay. Well, copy and paste that equation. And another thing, it makes the program very customizable to you, which is huge because nature is a novelty generator and it doesn't create two of the same of anyone. Even twins are completely different.
right.
So you need to, and eventually, if you really want to home in and have like a great physique or just amazing health, you really need to customize the plan specifically to you. Cookie cutter stuff is just, it might help like an obese person go from being obese to just being overweight, but it won't help an obese person go from being obese to just with great physique and great health and stuff of that sort. You need a lot more elaborate programming and really well thought out lifestyle, nutrition, and workout coaching to really be able to do that. Also, you mentioned pictures are huge. No, everyone's like, don't take your pictures, you're going to get discouraged. Well, a lot of times you hear a lot of people say like, oh, I decided to change when I saw my family photo and my stomach was sticking out or stuff of that sort. And I'll be like, whoa, what the hell happened there? The problem with weight gain is it's super gradual. You're gaining about like 5 pounds of excess fat per year. It's not that much. Can't even see that month to month. And people kind of adjust their clothing too, so it's less noticeable. So, so it's like your mind basically habituates to your appearance every year, and you can't quite see the difference.
Right.
But yeah, 5 years, 5 years goes by, you're 25 pounds overweight. 10 years goes by, you're 50 pounds overweight. And then all of a sudden you see that family photo and you have this huge gut or very noticeable breast tissue, et cetera, et cetera. And you're like, whoa, shit, how the hell did that happen? I didn't even see that coming. You hear that all the time. That's why it's important to take your weight plus your progression pictures, like Arthur said, I'll say with pictures, like once a month is good enough, you know, front, side, and back. I guarantee you a lot of people take a picture of your back without a shirt on, and you will see that your path is not very healthy. Okay, it's not normal to have like a lot of lower back fat or very huge love handles or stuff of that sort. Like not normal at all. It's a symptom of pathology, a symptom of poor lifestyle and nutritional choices. Well, let's go to the 5th month. That's the final one. That's when I really saw your body like looking like super mutant, like, you know, it's not even human anymore at that point. And I'm like, well, shit, you know, he's like surpassed me already. Maybe he should be coaching me. I shouldn't be.
No. Yeah, month 5 was quite an experience. One really quick thing that I'll say about weighing yourself daily is the whole accountability factor, because one thing I did struggle with tremendously in month 5 was craving. So, you know, we dropped my carbs again, and you know, I have a lot of determination and a lot of willpower, but I didn't realize that, you know, how powerful cravings could be. And so there were a couple of times where I did cheat, and I had well, and also it was coming up on Christmas, and my mom bakes these amazing shortbread cookies, and so I had a couple, and I thought, oh, that can't possibly do any harm. And then I had a glass of red wine, and so it's all these little incremental things that you think aren't going to harm you, and then you step on the scale the next day, and you know, you want to bury your head in the sand because wow, I went up 3 pounds. How is that even anatomically possible? So there's a huge accountability thing with weighing yourself. But month 5 was it was like almost towards the end, almost like magical, because I was getting stronger somehow, even though I was at the lowest amount of calories I'd ever consumed in my life, which wasn't really all that low, to be perfectly honest. It was like 1,800. That's not, you know, I've known people that have gone down to 15 and somehow managed to keep going. So it wasn't like I was in this crazy, insane caloric deficit, but it was enough that the changes started to really accelerate in weeks 2, 3, and 4 of that final month. And I was gaining strength, and so I was lifting heavier weight. And I I don't know if it's physically possible to gain muscle when you're on a calorie restricted diet, but I really felt that I was gaining muscle. And if I wasn't gaining muscle, then I was gaining muscle density, because something was taking place, and it was taking place incredibly quickly. And so all of a sudden, like that, you actually posted my very first progress shot and the very last progress shot of me in the blue camouflage. And honestly, when I took that photo, I couldn't believe that that was me. I thought, I can't believe that I've arrived at this point in my physique development, because I wasn't, I was hoping for it, but was I really expecting it? Maybe, maybe not. But to actually have the proof of it in a photograph, I was like, wow, this is really amazing. And so it felt like an incredible accomplishment. And yeah, I remember, I think it was the second check-in call that we had in month 5. I said to you, oh, like, I'm feeling kind of weak. I'm feeling kind of tired. And you said, well, you know, it's a hard month, and so without candy coating it, you basically just reinforced what I said. Said, yeah, you're tired and you're a little bit weak, but you know, it's month 5 is hard. And what you said was you were trying to etch in the finer details, the final and finer details of the physique. And so that gave me some encouragement. I thought, oh, okay, that's what we're doing. We're etching in the final details, and boy, did they ever etch in, like really amazingly so. And then that last week, just before I did my photos, you gave me a little bit of a carb bump, and boom, what that did to the muscles, the muscle fullness was just insane. And so, month 5 was difficult in moments. It was inspiring in moments, but definitely the most rewarding month of all, when you to finally see the fruits of all that labor, all that hard work, and all that devotion. And I was like, wow, this was really pretty incredible for me. So, and I wouldn't have been able to do it without you, because I had tried. This wasn't my first attempt at looking like this. I've bought online programs. I've done calorie reduction before. I've done calorie increase. I've all kinds of things. And so when I came to you, I was at a certain level of almost desperation, really, because I was so tired of looking the same way for so long. So yeah, to come to those final photos on month 5 was hugely rewarding, and so it was an exciting day.
With the other programs you purchased, were they already kind of like pre-made, or was it attached to like actual coaching?
No, no, they weren't attached to actual coaching. I was always afraid to make that leap into actual coaching. And a lot of that had to do with paradigms and beliefs. And so when I signed up with you, I did a lot of paradigm busting and a lot of belief busting, because one of the story, we talk about that in the story gap in the lasting fat loss module. And one of the stories that I kept telling myself was, well, you know what, you've been working out since you're 18 years old. You've read every single book. You've bought every single magazine. You've bought all these stupid programs from all these coaches, and you still look the same. What makes you think that this is going to be different? And so a lot of spinning my wheels in the mud took place over the years, and I'm not really sure why it never worked, but it never worked. And likely it was because, and you said it earlier in this live, they're cookie cutter programs, and if some guy, you lay down your money and he emails you a program and he's never asked you a single question about anything, and here's the program, and so then I would get the program. I'm like, oh great, I can't do back squats because I have degenerative disc in my neck, and every time I put a bar in my back, I get this shooting electrical pain in my fingertips. So what should I do? Or, oh damn, I can't deadlift from the floor because I've got stenosis in L1, 2, 3, and all the way down to probably the very bottom of my spine. What am I going to do? And so here I was with this very expensive program, and already it had become 20% useless to me. But there was nobody to reach out to and say, well, what can I do? How do I substitute? What should I substitute? Is this okay? Is that okay? So yeah, the short answer to, and I turned it into a long answer, but the short answer to that is, yeah, I had bought programs, but no coaching with them. Just never tailored to me, ever.
Yeah, I find it with pre-made programs, they're very troubling for like 99% of people, because inevitably it's kind of like the same as you show up to the doctor's office and the doctor doesn't talk to you at all, literally, or ask you anything of what's going on. And here's your prescription. And you're like, oh, dude, you don't even know like what is going on with me. How are you giving me like some kind of like whatever antibiotics or medical drugs or whatever, to cure whatever is going on with me. Same thing with like surgery. Imagine you show up for surgery, they never even talk to you. They're like, oh, we're just going to operate on like your neck. But I'm like, wait, like my ankle is injured, It's the same thing with pre-made programs. Like, dude, you can't have a pre-made program. It's just impossible. Everyone is so different. Like nature is a novelty generator. You won't even find the same like 2 grains of sand anywhere. Moreover, people are like far more complex than like a grain of sand. Most of them, but some of them you'd be surprised. And it just doesn't work like that. Like you have to. A good assessment, like I think Arthur and I, because you had the shoulder issue, the low back issue, and stuff of that sort, I think our assessment from start to finish lasted, it must have been at least like 3 hours, including the initial interview, the lifestyle assessment, and the mechanical assessment as well. And then we did like, I think an hour and a half program overview, and then we began the program. So it was really like 4.5 hours. And I hate to break it to you guys, but the people selling those pre-made programs, I mean, they're just putting money first ahead of your well-being, because that shouldn't be even legal to sell pre-made programs like that. Same thing with books. I mean, you can run into an author that actually might be very competent, might be very, very intelligent, but the problem is they don't know you personally. Like, for example, with back issues, back pain is like such a general term. There are like I said earlier in the podcast, there are a million reasons of why your back might be hurting. That's saying you have back pain is the same as saying like, oh, my car isn't starting. It's like, okay, is this a starter? Do I not have gas? Do I not have oil? Is the battery not working? You know what I mean? I don't. It could be like a million things, but it's just so vague and so general. That's not enough, and you need an in-depth assessment to be able to do that. So next time, you go to your doctors and they chat with you for 5 minutes for your first appointment with them, I personally would just walk away. This person is more of a running kind of like a revolving door client mill, just get you in, put you on some pills, get you out. Same thing with, I'm not even going to leave the fitness and wellness industry out. If you go into some boot camp and they just have you sign some waiver and then boom, throw you in a class with like 20 people, all doing the same exact workout with one coach overlooking 20 of you guys, I would walk away from that as well. Even with one-on-one coaching, remember, I don't know how it is in Canada, Arthur, but in the US, you don't need any credentials to be a personal trainer. You literally just say you're a personal trainer and that's it. And you guys, if you don't believe me, look it up online. I am 100% honest. That's how it works. It's the same when you hear a person say they're a nutritionist. Anyone can say they're a nutritionist. It's not a regulated word at all. And that's it, and just people take your word for it, et cetera, et cetera. So you really have to do your due diligence on finding the right person. And I would say some good base marks are, not necessarily is the practitioner in good shape, but a far telling sign is how successful are their clients? Do they have like a laundry list of successful testimonials of varying ages, varying ethnicities, varying educational backgrounds, et cetera, et cetera? What their work shows is a good representation of the quality of their work, surprisingly. Not like, are they in good shape? Which might say a little bit, but you're not paying them to be in shape. You're paying them to get you in shape or get healthy enough to not be on medical drugs or whatever it is. So some things to consider, okay? So also, regarding your experience, you also mentioned on our assessment call that you went to a lot of low back pain specialists and stuff of that sort, and that they weren't able to get you out of pain. Can you describe like the approach you experienced there versus actually being able to get out of pain and work out with intensity again with this program?
Yeah, so as I mentioned in those calls with you, I had been on the sort of healing modality treadmill for a good number of years, and so it was chiropractors and osteopaths and physiotherapists and massage therapists and pretty much anybody who did body work I was going to. And then one of the most discouraging assessments I ever had is I went to, of all places, the University of Toronto sports clinic because I was so desperate and my back pain was interfering with not only my working out, but also my general life. And I wanted to keep working out because I was afraid to stop, but working out was becoming so painful. Like you said, I couldn't stand it. I dreaded going to the gym. And so I went to the University of Toronto Sports Clinic thinking this is the place to be. They deal with athletes. And the doctor there said to me, he said, well, we can't really find out why your back hurts as much as it does. Yes, you've got some disc degeneration, but they did leg length discrepancy, x-rays, and a whole host of things, whole host of tests. He said, we can't really figure out, because he said, everybody's got degenerative disc, but he said, you seem to be manifesting more pain than the average person with this kind of an MRI. And then he said to me, well, he said, look at it this way, in a few years, your lower spine will all fuse together and you won't feel a thing. And I walked out of that and I thought, wow, I can't believe a doctor just said that to me. That was like the most depressing thing you could, a sports doctor to send a guy who had been active his whole life and wanted to keep on being active. So then the pandemic came, and of course that brought all treatment whatsoever to a screeching halt. And then I started up with you, and I haven't been to a single practitioner since we started. So no chiropractors, no massage therapists, no physiotherapists, no anybody. The only practitioner I did go to was the acupuncturist who worked on my shoulder, and that's because she was doing traditional Chinese medicine, not the chiropractic style of acupuncture. And so as you started to explore, well, first of all, we did that very thorough assessment. Nobody had ever said to me, I think you've got spinal stenosis, but you did. And so I Googled it and I started reading about it. And I thought, yeah, you know what? That really does sound like what my back is doing. That's what it sounds like. And so then through your suggestion and then a little bit of experimentation, we started working with exercises to see, could I perform these exercises and not have back pain interfere and make me want to stop doing it? So the answer was yes, we could. We could use these exercises. I could do them. My back felt great, but it wasn't just the lower body exercises when I first started that was causing me a problem. Like you mentioned, pull-ups would make my back hurt. Well, why on earth would a pull-up make my back hurt? Well, it did. And so we found different exercises that I could do that didn't bring on the back pain. And then, of course, like I mentioned, the Stu McGill core strengthening, faithfully did that every single warm-up for my sessions. And it was though the combination of those things that led me to today, where at this age, and not that I ever think about my age because I don't, but at this age to stand up in the morning and not go, oh, my back, which I had been doing since I was in my late 30s, that's quite an accomplishment. And I'm like, I can't believe that that it happened, but it did happen. And so here I am. My back feels good. My core, I believe, is way more stronger than it ever was. And the other thing with the exercises is, I guess we sort of become brainwashed. If you become too much of an exercise junkie and you're on all the websites and you're reading everything about exercising, you don't believe that you can build decent legs with a single leg press. At least I didn't. I thought, oh no, you can't. You have to squat. You have to deadlift. At the very least, a leg press should be like, your last resort. But we were trying exercises that I never ever would have tried before because I feared they would be ineffective. And yet, there's a couple of photos that I sent you, and I even pointed out to you. I said, look at how different my legs are. And they were all exercises that you had chosen for me to try, didn't hurt my back, and made my legs grow, or at the very least, made the muscle density in my legs increase. So
Mhm.
it really is possible to get off the practitioner's treadmill. And if you can get off of it, I highly encourage you to do that, because I am the living proof that it was miserable. It was a miserable experience. All the money, all the practitioners, all the questions I asked, and all of them basically shrugging at the end. Well, we don't know. We don't know why you hurt so much. And some of them, sports guys said, well, maybe you should quit working out. And that isn't the answer that I wanted. And I said, well, you can't take that away from me. I said, I've been a workout guy my whole life, and a little bit of sports. Like I was a soccer player. So you don't. I think that's the worst thing a practitioner can do
Mhm.
to a client, is take away their hope. Uh, and so when I came to you and like I said, came to you with the open bowl, waiting to see what you were going to fill it up with. And that was one of the things you made me start doing, was recording my pain score every single day. And I think that proved to be highly, highly valuable, because in the beginning, of course, the scores were high and I was like, oh my God, this is kind of depressing. My back's a mess. But when you see your scores start to come down, you're like, oh, and then we'd have the weekly call and you go, oh, well, you know what? Your weekly average is such and such, and it would be lower than the week prior. And then you start to see progress. But if you aren't tracking it, if you aren't recording it and measuring it, you don't really know that there's progress. So, and now here I am. I mean, some days my back bothers me, but like you say, you have to record the pain triggers, and it's almost never the gym. Like I'm at my mom's place. I flew out here. Sitting on the airplane in those dreadful seats for 4 hours is what did it, and gave me back pain for a day. And then I had to get in the car, and her husband drove me another 2 hours to get out here to the farm. So it was like all that sitting. Well, for me, prolonged sitting is a terrible, terrible pain
Mhm.
trigger. But going to the gym and doing a single leg press, not a pain trigger. Doing a single leg hamstring curl, not a pain trigger. Hack squats, nothing. All fine, all perfect. So that tells you a lot. It's so often we point to the wrong thing as the cause of the pain, and you really need to dig deep and find out what it is. And you do that by recording stuff, writing things down, and then going back and reading what you wrote. Yeah.
Yeah, and I find that like a very common theme across like all health fields, probably like the worst in the medical industry by far, is that like no one does thorough assessments anymore. You know, like how is it like this MD in charge of like an entire university's athletic program can't identify your pain triggers, doesn't know what's causing it? And we did like a McGill assessment. Basically, I took his entire certification course and read his books like 50 times over. I even hired him for mentoring as well to kind of touch up the details of the knowledge and stuff of that sort, and hired one of his main guys also. And an hour later, we figured out exactly what your pain triggers are. And we're able to customize like a lifestyle nutrition program to help avoid them in the meantime, to desensitize the area. And then, progress from there as the tissue develop more biological resilience, kind of add more exercises and more intensity to it, which takes time. It doesn't happen in like 2 weeks, 3 weeks. It takes, like with Arthur, I mean, 3 to 5 months, sometimes it could take up to 7 or 8 months in order for a disc tissue to heal completely gristle over. It could take up to 10 years for a lot of people, completely start from fresh, basically. And I bet you, like, out of all those professionals, this was the case with me too when I injured my back in 2015. Like, no one even looked at your lifting technique or your technique. Like, they didn't even bother to even look at that, like even look at the first identify what's causing the pain, and then identify how you're doing those behaviors too. Because maybe you could keep those behaviors if you modified it, like instead of picking boxes off the ground with your low back, for example, but use your squatted down more with your hips and glutes and picked it up with your glutes, all of a sudden you could pick boxes off the ground now. So you didn't have to eliminate that. Just as an example, everyone is different, stuff of that sort. But it's just kind of like, I know Canada too is, I believe, like on a universal healthcare system too. So I don't, honestly, they might be because they have volume, like so many people coming in that they don't want to. I don't even want to say they can't. They just don't want to. A lot of times it's just out of laziness or just incompetence, combination of laziness and incompetence. But in the U.S., we don't have like a general universal healthcare system. I don't even know what happened to Obamacare. I don't even keep track of that, or even if it's around. But just practitioners don't even get paid for assessments. So they're like, well, why do I even do it? You know what I mean? And I guarantee you guys, from my experience, the best practitioners, like outside of surgery and emergency surgery and stuff of that sort, the best practitioners are never going to take insurance, because insurance will never pay them the honest wage that you need to be paid to do a thorough assessment. And it all starts with that great assessment. Because without that, you just have like a false hypothesis. And you can't come up with the right answer from a false hypothesis. It's just like, unless you rely on dumb luck. But dumb luck will never let you win consistently over a long period, even if you do short-term wins too. Because it's unpredictable and you don't know what's causing what, and you can't keep track of anything. And another issue I found with like just the healthcare system, there's no follow-up. They see you like 4 months later. I don't even know how they even remember you. Even at, probably saw like a couple hundred people in between. Then they look at some chart. I don't even know how they remember your face, moreover your name, and exactly like your specific situation of what's going on with your specific thing, or et cetera, et cetera. And it kind of like, sometimes I find it a little comical too, how many times people like totally like sacrifice their dreams for a career because it offers health insurance. I'm like, dude, that health insurance is bogus. First of all, you wouldn't even probably need it if you had more time to take care of yourself and didn't work such a stressful job. Second, what are you going to get out of it? Just these shitty doctor visits and medical drugs? How's that healthcare? That's not healthcare. That's like the lowest of the lowest quality healthcare you can possibly get, and has nothing to do with actually making you healthy enough to not be on all that shit. Basically, it's kind of like an industry for the most part. Another thing too, so we finished the cutting phase with you, and a lot of times people think they need to stay super ripped and shredded their entire life. Well, it's not definitely the case. And we just recently, I think 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago, transitioned you to a lean bulk phase, which is kind of what I want you to stay on basically for the rest of your life. Right. And what people should be kind of more over striving for. If they have excess body fat, sure, they need to cut that out first. But then they need to transition more into like maintaining a reasonable body fat level while gradually increasing muscle over time. Can you talk about your experience with like the lean bulk phase? I know it's only been a few weeks, but
yeah. So we're 2 weeks into the lean bulk phase. certainly I feel a lot more energetic because we bumped the carbs up, and that helped. And even that had a huge rebound effect. Like my muscles just kind of like swelled right up and looked really amazing. And so now I've got a kind of a fullness and a kind of a powerful look now to my physique that I never really had. And that's just because of the additional carbs. The so the diet now, in a way, became easy because the protein and the fat stay the same. It's just the carbs that you manipulate, and so. Uh, but you can't go crazy. Like you can't just start indiscriminately throwing food in there. So when I say we did a carb increase, so now that means I get to have a little bit more oatmeal in the morning and a little bit more brown rice in the evening, or sweet potato or whatever carbohydrate is that I'm using. But you have to still make those really positive food choices. You can't eat crap. You can't say, okay, great, now I can have a pizza, now I can have a beer because I'm allowed to have 75 grams more of carbs than I was having in my cutting phase. Well, that's not true at all. You've got to adhere to all those lifestyle changes that you work so hard and that I work so hard at in months 1 through 5. You still have to live those changes so that you don't fall back into old habits. One thing that I really learned through the cutting phase that I wasn't even aware of is I have a relationship with food that is somewhat comfort based, and because I've always been a little bit of a skinny guy, or skinny fat, as I used to say, I didn't realize I had a comfort relationship to food. But it was in month 5 when I was struggling with cravings that I realized that I did. And so uh, the way you get down into those into that relationship of comfort with food is you got to start asking yourself some tough questions. And what I learned was it was the core values. When you told me to start writing down my core values and start thinking about them, and I did, and then I realized, wow, if all of this stuff is important to me, how come I'm only living like 50 to maybe 75% of these core values? And could that potentially have something to do with my comfort seeking that I use food to achieve? I was trying to achieve comfort through food. Now, why is that? So very, very interesting things that you taught me through the lifestyle programs that I learned and held on to. But now that I'm in the lean bulking phase, and at the very, very beginning, and it is a very slow ramp up process, you can't just go whole hog and go crazy. Um, yeah, I feel pretty good. I feel pretty strong. Um, as far as the training itself goes, I like the training. There's a little bit of a switch in volume. There's you still do your 5 sets on your big lifts, and then the volume is 3 sets of 8 to 10 on your secondary lifts. And so I like that, and I've been hitting it really hard, uh, really chasing the progressions, the progressive overload on that. I feel good. It'd be interesting to see what happens at the end of month 1 for lean bulking, and then, like you said, I'll assess. I'll check out my physique. I'll check out my weight. If I feel that I warrant another increase in carbohydrate, I will. Something small, like an increment of 25 grams, perhaps. If I feel that I'm losing, the sort of the leanness that I achieved, I obviously won't go back to the caloric level that we were using when I was on the cutting phase because, like you say, it's not sustainable forever. But I will maybe we'll see what happens. I'll assess, or maybe I'll tweak my carbs down so that I can look a little bit leaner. Certainly, I've already thought that. Certainly, when summertime rolls around. So for us, it's later than it is for you guys in the U.S. But for us, probably around May and June, I may just do a little bit of a minor carb restriction so that I can look nice and lean for the 3 months of summer that we have, and then I'll jump back into lean bulking. But I think there's a tremendous amount of freedom that comes now, intelligent freedom that comes now in the lean bulking phase, because you can either increase or decrease your carbs at will, depending upon the look that it is you're trying to achieve. So yeah, I feel really good about it so far. Like I say, we're just a couple of weeks into it, but eager to see how it shakes down at the end of this month.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning into the podcast. I'm curious, have you ever been confused by the labels in the grocery store? In Yevgeny's book, he demystifies the difference between caged, cage-free, free-range, and pasture-raised meats. He also covers how to avoid GMOs, source high-quality water, fish, supplements, and other related topics. It's a beautifully illustrated, non-technical read that comes with a comprehensive video series and other extended learning materials. Jump on Amazon and check out the book titled Anti-Factory Farm Shopping Guide by Eugene Trufkin. Now let's dive back into the podcast.
Yeah, also for maintenance, and I kind of recommend this for a lot of my clients as well, is I would always recommend that on the lean bulk phase, like always just, eat out like once a week. You know what I mean? To if they want, like a lot of times I do eat out maybe like once a month. It's usually like sushi, or there's this Mexican place near me as well, or like a steak or something. But usually on Sundays, I like to kind of go to a study lounge, like some really nice kind of lounge area, and kind of read there. But I still try to keep everything organic, and I would go to like Whole Foods here and just buy like a lot of organic snacks, like organic drinks and stuff like that. That's kind of my form of eating out, even sometimes like organic ice cream. And I just kind of snack on that while reading books. It's kind of very relaxing for me. And it helps break up the monotony of what you generally eat during the week. That's what helps me. Everyone is so different. And the cool thing is there are many strategies that work. You just have to figure out one that works well for you. But unless it's totally your thing, I definitely would try to incorporate eating out like once a week. Like maybe on Wednesday for some people might be a good day. That way it kind of gives a break midweek. So you can kind of finish the second half of the week. Also, like incorporating some kind of sauna or steam room, or maybe a hot bath might be a good idea Wednesday. Just kind of bring those cortisol down, because a lot of times people stress eat. But if they manage their chronic stress, especially, I find that, the sugar cravings and just a lot of processed food or, fast food cravings just tend to disappear, and they don't really need like discipline. A lot of times it's like you don't need discipline. You just need to create a body that's not so stressed out and craving these foods to suppress its cortisol levels so you can kind of function normally. Stuff of that sort. But can you also can you touch on your experience with like holistic coaching, in the sense that most coaching just goes with like, oh, we'll just change your diet and we'll change your workout program, and then everything would even out. I personally found that kind of system extremely limiting. And even if it did manage to actually achieve your goal of like weight loss, for example, the chances of relapse is like 90%. And which it is typically 80 to 90% of people that lose any amount of weight regain it within 2 to 5 years, or some kind of number of that sort. And from my opinion, my observation, doing this for 15 years now, with a very high success rate of getting people off of various medical drugs and also helping them attain the physique they want to attain, that it needs to go way above and beyond just nutrition and workout coaching. Can you kind of talk about how you felt all the other lifestyle coaching variables helped impact the program and progress for you?
Yeah, sure. So initially, one of the very first things we did was to start using the smart supplements, the supplements that will make a difference in your well-being. So, for instance, the warm water, lemon juice, and glycine being an amino acid that will help you with recovery. It also helps you sleep better. And the lemon juice, because lemon being one of the few acidic fruits that will convert its pH once it's into your bloodstream, it actually converts to alkali and helps to normalize the pH in your body. So that was immensely helpful. And then I went on the boron for my joints, and you recommend, and fish oil, which fish oil is a funny one. You don't really notice the benefit of it until you've been on it for quite a while, because we live in an omega-6 dominant world, and we have too few omega-3s. And omega-6, of course, is inflammatory, and that will contribute to you feeling like crap. But when you're on fish oil for a very long time, and then you can sort of look to the areas in which your body is feeling better overall. And you can say, well, yeah, I guess the fish oil is taking down my systemic inflammation, which most of us are in a chronic state of, and I'm starting to feel a lot better. And then came all of the lifestyle videos. So the very early videos were the ones where you taught us how to save time, how to become an efficient shopper, how to become an efficient cooker at home, how to prepare your food. And by becoming efficient at these things, you're freeing up a whole lot of time. All of a sudden, time that you used to devote to running all over the place, getting the food that you needed to eat, or taking an untold amount of time to cook the food that you were going to eat. Once you become efficient at that, you have more time to devote to yourself. And some of the things that you had me devote time to were like the hot baths, which I did frequently, and that helped a lot because I was still working at the time when we first started, and I didn't like that job, and it was stressful. And so you don't realize the psychological benefits to the hot bath. Then later you introduce the cold bath, which in all honesty, I hate it. It's weird for a Canadian to say I don't tolerate cold well, but I don't. So I did the cold bath. I didn't like it. Maybe it helped me. I'm not sure. It might have, but didn't really like it. But the point being
It helps you appreciate life more by not being,
exactly. But the point is that you were introducing different modalities that would help bring my entire physical being into a calmer, happier state. And, because we all know about the dangers of cortisol, but what I think that most of us don't realize is that how much of the way in which we live contributes to cortisol production. And certainly if you have a job you don't like, there's a cortisol spike. If you have a wretched commute to and from that job you don't like, there's more cortisol. So you talked about a lot of different things that I could try to bring down my cortisol, which I did, and that helped immensely. And then, of course, like I said, the lasting fat gain module that you had me watch, that's the one where you talk about lifestyle choices and nutrition choices and how those choices affect your mindset, because your mindset is what drives you to make either a good choice or a bad choice. If you're in an unhealthy mindset, you're going to make shitty lifestyle and shitty nutrition choices. If you're in a good, healthy mindset, you're going to make positive choices for yourself. And so you had a whole list of symptoms: depression, anger, insomnia. And I'm like, okay, how many of these do I engage in? Well, unfortunately, I was engaging in a whole lot. And so you really got me thinking about things I could change in the way in which I live my life, the way in which I could change my mindset, the way I look at life, not just the way I live it, but also the way I'm looking at life. You talked about love-hate relationships, and that could be not just with an individual, it could be with a job. It could also be with a behavior that you have. Maybe there's a behavior that you engage in compulsively and you hate it, but you can't escape it because it's become an ingrained habit. You talked about emptiness. You talked and why people feel empty, even though they apparently are achieving the things that one would think would bring somebody a lot of happiness, like a beautiful new car, or a brand new house, or a beautiful spouse, and yet still we feel emptiness. Why is that? And so and then your surroundings, who and what are you surrounding yourself with, and why is that important? Well, it turns out it's immensely important because it has an effect on your psyche and the way you perceive yourself and the way you perceive how you operate in the world. Why we are driven to seek out unconditional love. A lot of times we don't realize we're seeking unconditional love, but for some reason, whatever happened to you in your life, you feel you're not getting it, so you turn to all these other things to try and get it. Well, those things aren't capable of providing you with the love you seek. So, and that took us down to core values and the importance of identifying core values, what they are, why are they important to you, how true to those core values are you being? Is this just something you aspire to, or are you actually living this core value? So there's a lot of really not just good information, but also you led me to some really hard questions, and I was really in the end so thankful to be able to ask myself those hard questions, because really for the first time in my life I feel like I'm getting to a place where I'm becoming more myself. Or all these many years, I and we feel we've got to be somebody else for our parents, for our spouses, for our employers. Certainly I worked for a very difficult employer, and when I think of who and what I had to become to satisfy that employer, And then I'm really, really lucky because I got to do early retirement and I opted out. And it wasn't until maybe I was into the end of the first year of my retirement that I realized the demands that that employer had put on me and how far away from myself I had gotten because I was trying to satisfy this employer. But I didn't really realize that until I started listening to the modules that you had me listening to. You had me talk about my story gap. There's who you want to be and who you actually are being, because you believe you've got to be all those things to satisfy X, Y, and Z. So when you talk about holistic coaching, I have never met any coach of any sort that required of me to examine myself. That's self-examination on a physical level, on a spiritual level, on a psychological level. And you provided me with all this information, all these resources. You said, well, you can read this book and you can watch this video and you can try this. And then, so like, there's this incredible list of resources that I can now work through to become the person that I really have always wanted to be, or really need to be in many cases. So holistic coaching, yeah, I don't see any examples of it out there. And it's why I chose you, because like I said, I followed you for 2 years. And so I knew at the time that I hired you that you knew what you were talking about. I saw your list of accreditation, and then, your Czech Institute certified and Stu McGill certified. And then there's all of those videos, all of that free content. And I would watch all of your videos and think, how can this guy be so smart? How does he know so much? And he's willing to share it with everybody. And so that was what made my decision to come to you easier, even though I did struggle with the decision because I had all my old paradigms that I was trying to escape. Paradigms that said, don't hire him, nothing's going to change, you're going to stay the same. And then we started the program, and as the program ramped up, the holistic coaching became, you fleshed it out more and more and more. And now that I'm here very close to the end of the program and I look back on it, I think, wow, what an incredible wealth of information and thought stimulation you have provided me with. It's just really, really incredible. So you didn't just take my physique to a better place, although that was the most visible thing that you did. You took the entirety of my being to a new place, and a place that I'm still on the path of accomplishing, of exploring, of discovering. So it's been quite a journey, I got to tell you. Really amazing.
Yeah, I kind of struggle with, like, from the marketing perspective on, I just market people's physique change, and I think that's great and everything, and it does have a huge positive, positive effect on their psychology and self-esteem, et cetera, et cetera. But I think, like, all that other stuff you mentioned is actually, like, far more important and impactful to the person. I just don't know exactly, like, how to show that in a picture, especially
Right.
with people online, their span is so short. You can't kind of write a long paragraph of, like, what this person, the changes they've experienced, because almost no one is going to read that, So it's like internet seems to kind of like, hey, you got to do this, like, really quick picture or stuff of that sort. So I'm still kind of struggling with that. But I feel like all that stuff you said, that's like what real healthcare looks like, and that's where real healing occurs when people, and that's where the real challenge is too. It's fairly easy to get on a workout program, a nutrition program, which is needed too, because you have a biological body and you need to attain to the needs of that biological system. And it has certain set laws that if you don't follow, it tends to fall apart. And it's slightly variable from person to person. But that's all that stuff you talked about, the core values, not wearing masks in life, et cetera, et cetera. That's what set the foundation to any journey. And if your foundation kind of sucks, it doesn't matter, like, how great the house is you're building on top of it. It's going to crumble. It's just basic construction 101. You need a solid foundation. And to do that, you need to do a couple things. But one of the things you mentioned, which I feel is important for a lot of people, is they just need to be aware of, like, the myriad of masks they wear. Because I find, especially from observing people, the more masks a person wears and the further away they get away from who they truly are, the more stress there's going to be on that central nervous system And thus, the more maladaptive behavior the person will have to form to continue to keep living a life they don't want to live, which leads to poor lifestyle and nutritional choices, which leads to depression, anxiety, weight gain, whatever, sleep, psychologically induced chronic insomnia, anger issues, sexual dysfunction, you name it. I mean, the list is almost endless. And I find that's why you really don't see any lasting change in almost anyone, because they just never even attend to that, or they give some kind of like really half-hearted, pathetic attempt, like, oh, I read this book. Okay, that's enough. You know what I mean? I read this one psychology book, probably written by a psychologist that's an alcoholic on the weekends themselves. I used to be, like I explained to you, I used to be a huge psychology fan. I totally bought into it. I, got a psychology degree from the University of California, Irvine, total GPA of 3.7, last 2 years, like 3.9 or something like that. I totally fell for it. But at the end of the day, all it really is just like what I refer to it as industrial psychology. They're just really in the business of changing belief systems to get you to mold into, oh, let's work on your anxiety so you can work more. Let's work on your depression so you can have better relationships, more, or have more money, more of this, more of that. And it has like nothing to do these days of literally finding out who you really are. It's just all about changing belief systems. That's why you kind of see people, they go to therapists for like freaking 10, 15, 20 years. And they look at you and they're like, oh yeah, I'm feeling so much better. But you look at them and they still like look like shit. Clearly they kind of like don't feel great. And it might have helped like a little bit, but I'm like, dude, 10 years already and you're 2% better. You're on all these like psychiatric drugs, it's like, it's time to reevaluate if that approach is working. And from my experience and my personal opinion, industrial psychology doesn't work to produce healing, lasting change for the person, from my experience. But take it as it is. I don't know if you have any experience with that yourself.
Yeah, I do actually, and you're right. And I went to see a Jungian therapist for 14 years and really didn't, in the end, was no further ahead than the very first day I walked into his office. So I think that when we talk about change, and you just said it a moment ago, the operative expression is lasting change, not just change. It's one thing to change. You can change your body and you can change your personality, but is it going to be lasting change? Is it going to be change that you can carry with you through the rest of your life? And the only way you're going to be able to bring about lasting change is to find out what made you the way you were in the first place. Like if you are overweight, if you're obese, what's the mindset? Not the eating. We all know that eating makes you fat, overeating makes you fat, but what's the mindset that led you to obesity? Why are you depressed? Why are you angry? Well, it's your unhealthy mindset. Well, how did you get that unhealthy mindset, and how are you going to change that unhealthy mindset? And so that was a lot of the things that I learned through your program. My therapist never ever once asked me that question, ever asked me to examine my mindset. And he was a trained therapist. He trained in Zurich for decades to become a therapist. And I come to you, you're a coach, and you changed my body and also changed the way I think about myself and about my life. So truly invaluable, really.
Yeah, and I find like the most important thing is figuring out the belief system that led to certain behaviors that led to a specific problem ABC. Without doing that, you're just going to keep repeating the same pathological behaviors. Maybe at times you'll just substitute one pathological behavior for another, and you're just kind of like loop of chasing symptoms your entire life, never getting better. And then you're on the 401k plan of your local therapist, or like what I like to refer to, I've heard from some other Czech professional, I forgot exactly who it was. It might have been Paul Czech himself, but their BMW fund. You help them with their nice cars and stuff like that. And you stay good enough to keep returning, but never actually come to a complete resolution of any of your problems because you never dealt with the belief system that led to the behavior that led to problem ABC. And I think in terms of our therapy conversation here, the reason for that is because psychology has gone away from finding out who you are. And if you don't know who you are, like, what do you know?
That's right.
You're just basically walking around in the forest at night without a flashlight. You're just randomly bumping into stuff and hoping you might make your way to the road and get to the local town, but you're just like completely lost because, dude, I mean, if you don't know who you are, then like, what do you know? What you like, what you don't like, what you need to be doing, what kind of relationships you need to be getting into. And like I said, all psychology does is just belief system changes. They just make inferences upon inferences, which take you just further away from the definition of who you truly are. And it's like, okay, like results speak for themselves, man. I really don't see almost anyone getting better taking that approach. But well, a few more questions I'd just like to get your opinion on. What's your take, Arthur, on like males that just keep putting stuff off, like keep putting their mental and physical health off. They're in their 40s and they're like, oh, I'll do it when I get my next promotion. They're in their 50s. Oh, I'll do it when, this and this happens and like Jupiter aligns with all its moons and the solar system, then it's going to be a perfect time to strike and stuff of that sort. Because I mean, just basic math, at least in the US, the average person dies around 76. I mean, if they're 35, life is already almost half over. If they're 40, it's like 52%, 50, 65% over, 60, 79% over, 70, 92% over. I even had sometimes people come to me in their 70s and they're like, well, it's not a good time for me to start focusing on my mental and physical health. I'm like, dude, like, there's not that much time left at this point. You got to make it happen now. I don't know. What's your opinion? Do you run into talking to a lot of kind of males and stuff of that sort, and you hear that, and what's your take on hearing that and how it makes you feel?
Yeah, so my personal saying is, your procrastination is killing you, and it literally is, and procrastinate because it goes back to that, that saying that my female friend had, when the pain of staying the same becomes so great, that's when you'll make your change. But uh, we procrastinate because we're telling ourselves a story, and I certainly told myself a story before I hired you over and over again. And then I remember the night that I composed that message that I sent you, I was in bed and I said to myself, you are not turning out the light without sending this guy a message, because you have been putting this off and putting this off. And I'm so glad that I did it when I finally did, because every day that you get up is a blessing. There's no guarantee that you're going to wake up tomorrow. So what are you waiting for? Because it could end at any second. And that's not being gloomy or being a doomsday predictor. It's a fact. I had so many colleagues die last year. It was alarming. And if you don't do something for yourself today, that's one more day that you've lost. And now it's like, it's hard to believe it's February the 4th, 2023. Like, how did we get here so fast? I still feel like writing 2020 on my checks. Not that I write a whole lot of checks, but I can barely grasp that we're in 2023. Like, really, what are you waiting for? Do something now, because like you say, time is running out. We don't know how much time we've got left. And if you really want to make a change in your life, then you have got to do it today. The other thing that I keep running up against I don't have a lot of guys that are my age because I find them depressing. But one guy that is my age, he keeps saying to me, well, especially when I started on this program, and he'd say, how's the program going? And some days I say, oh, it's going really, really great. My shoulder doesn't hurt anymore. And then some days I say, oh, well, it's kind of hard. I'm tired. And, I really wish I could just, crack open a bottle of wine. And he would say to me, well, remember, you're not 25 anymore. And so this is the other thing, is too many people buy into a myth as to what your chronological age is about. Now, sure, there are no denying the scientific facts that your body changes as you age, but there's also no denying that you can make some incredible changes and some incredible gains and some incredible advancements in your health, no matter what age you are. It's just a matter of taking control. You must take control of your life, of your health, of your mind, and how are you going to do that? So I certainly did have to fight against some of those attitudes. Another friend that I had, he challenged me every step of the way while I was on this program. Why do you want to do that? Why are you suffering so much? Why are you restricting your calories? Why are you going to the gym so much? Why don't you just live your life? I said, I am living my life. This is my life. I said, I want to have a healthy life. I want mental, physical, spiritual wellness. And for me, this is how I intend to get there. So I find that we do run up against certain attitudes and certain belief systems of others, and it just seems like it's human nature. They want to make you stay the same because they feel comfortable staying the same, and that's where it comes down to surroundings. Surroundings is one of the healthy mindset choices that we need to make. Who are you going to surround yourself with? People that are challenging you all the time or reminding you of your age, or people who are encouraging you, make friends with other fitness enthusiasts to say, hey, did you make it to the gym today? Yeah, I did. Oh, awesome. Good for you. What did you do? Encouraging others, and you being encouraged by those others. So pick your friends really wisely. And if you can't find the kind of friends that are encourage you, then go it alone. I spend, I would say, 99% of my time on my own. But that's because I can operate in a positive environment. I'm very good at self-encouragement. So, yeah, I hope that answers your question, but that's kind of was my experience.
Yeah, and I find, in my opinion, like, dude, you have to be insane to want to fit in with the normal population these days.
Yes.
I mean, 9 out of 10 people are, metabolically, 9 out of 10 American adults are metabolically unhealthy. It's the weekend. I always say this on the weekend because I always do these on Saturday. Walk outside anywhere. And I'm sure it's the same in Canada because it's a very common theme in the Western world in general. And like literally, take a pencil, do the statistics. Next people you run into, jot down how many of them you see are full of mental and physical pain. You can see it in their face, are overweight, full of disease. You'll see 90%, no problem. Anywhere in any state in the US, and I guarantee you almost anywhere in any state in Canada as well.
Yes.
You'll see a copy and model. And that's because pathology has been normalized. It's funny when your friend mentioned like, oh, why are you doing this to yourself? It's a hard life. I'm like, dude, it's very difficult being overweight, looking at yourself in the mirror, not being happy with what you see looking back at you, knowing you're doing it to yourself, and then motivate yourself enough to continue to do the very behavior that's leading to you hating yourself for continuing to do that. Now, that is a hard life. And being on all these like nasty medical drugs that are just basically like numbing you out into oblivion. It's kind of like the saying I always say, it's like if we're walking at a park together and a rock gets stuck inside your shoe that's hurting your foot, I would personally tell you like, hey, take your shoe off, take the rock out, put your shoe back in, walk without pain. Meanwhile, the local MD with his 11 years of education and his white coat would say, hey, Arthur, don't even worry about it. Keep the rock there. Take painkillers instead. Taking the rock out is just way too dumb of an approach. And I'm an MD and I've had all this education and I'm still sick myself somehow. But I'm going to give you health advice, et cetera, et cetera. Don't get me wrong. The emergency medical staff, I love those guys. That's where, they really excel and they're true angels in the sky and stuff of that sort. I currently train and I've trained many emergency room physicians and they're truly amazing people. But all those drug dealer MDs out there that aren't really practicing real healthcare, go scam someone else, with your scams and stuff of that sort. So try to have some kind of ethics in your practice and some morals, okay?
What's sad is unhealthy has become the norm. I can, no exaggeration, at least once a week, some guy will come up to me in the gym and say, man, how old are you? And I hate that question. I'm like, oh my God, again? He said, because you are in phenomenal shape. And they're so stunned to see somebody who is obviously over 50 or whatever it is they think I am, because I never end up telling them my true age. But it's become so normal to see people in an older age range look like they're one step out of the grave, that they see some guy who's the complete opposite of that, and they literally will cross the gym floor to ask me how old I am. I'm like, well, I think that's really strange. I would never think of crossing the gym floor to ask a guy how old he is because he looked good, but it just goes to show you that we have accepted decay as a societal And I think that's a huge red flag. Why do we accept that? Why should that be the norm? It shouldn't be at all.
Yeah, at all. And like I said, dude, you have to be crazy, insane, or like completely retarded if you want to fit in with the normal these days. Because the normal is sick, tired, drugged, broke. Like, why would you want to even emulate that? And our healthcare professionals are, for the most part, the same exact way. Just look at most doctors; they're very overweight, very inflamed looking. They're very overworked. So when they tell you, like, "Hey, you shouldn't work so much and stress out so much," well, when was the last time you did that,
Yeah.
man? How come you haven't figured out how to do that in the real world?
Yeah.
Seek out all professionals and also people that have gone on an honest health journey, like Arthur, that have made it happen under real world stresses. Uh, that's where the real answers are, not because they have some kind of degree or some lab coat or whatever. Remember, 200, I think last time I checked, it was 230,000 people die every year for medical procedures alone in the US. 235,000. I think in all of Vietnam 10-year war, the US has lost like 50,000 soldiers, which is also a tragedy. Just to give you a comparison, that's wartime, 10 years in a very tough war, versus every single year, 235,000 Americans are dying from medical malpractice every single year. I actually think it's actually much higher. It's probably around like 700 or like a million or something of that sort. If you kind of really count, like prescribed drugs, but they died from it 10 years later or something of that sort from complications of that sort. And dude, I mean, numbers speak for themselves. Walk outside anywhere in Canada, anywhere in the US, 9 out of 10 people are full of disease, obesity, misery.
Yeah.
The funny thing is, hunter-gatherer societies, guys like me and you will probably be below average, even for our age groups.
Sure.
But the fact that we're like the top 1% is what's ridiculous. Shows you how far the standards have fallen, So it's kind of sad, and unfortunately, a lot of people are going to live that way. Do you have like any friends that are on like a shitload of medical drugs and that they're like, "Oh, it's my genetics. I have to take these because my doctor told me"?
Well, yeah, but pretty much all of them, which is why I don't have a whole lot of friends in my age range. The one that constantly challenged me every step of the way. He's 250 pounds, and his doctor's on his case all the time to lose weight, and he's had prostate cancer, and now he's type 2 diabetic, which is totally brought on in adulthood by what you eat. I have other friends that are on blood pressure medication, stress medication. I have a lot of friends who are saying, "Well, it's my age." I'm like, "No, it's not your age. Or it doesn't have to be your age. It's the shit you put into your mouth, like that factory farming book that you wrote. Like there's a very clear thing that we can point to that is slowly killing all of us. All the pesticides, all the plastic, all the chemicals that we are inundated with on a daily basis is what is making everybody feel and look so terrible, really. Whereas, and yes, it is expensive to eat organically, but I'm almost now 100% organic. There's a couple things that I still haven't been able to go 100% on because I don't know what inflation is like in the US right now, but here in Canada, it's out of control. But you can make room in your budget for eating organic by eliminating the other unnecessary expenditures in your life. You've talked about that quite frequently. We do. We spend money on things that really aren't necessary. And a lot of the things that we spend money on, we're trying to fill a gap of emptiness. And so you get that new thing, and then you're like, it diverted me for about a week, and now I feel empty again. Well, that's something you need to look at. But to get back to the point as to why people look the way they do, I think it's what's happened to the food, what's happened to the water, uh, what's happened to the things that we put our food in, all that plastic. It's terrible. There's too many chemicals, way too many chemicals.
Yeah, and that's true. All that stuff is a problem, but hey, me and you are making it happen, and we live on the same earth, right? So there are solutions. And I don't know how it is. I obviously don't know the inflation in Canada. It might be higher than the US or the prices in Canada and stuff of that sort. But I mean, in the US, the average American spends $8,000 to $16,000 a year on non-essential expenses. 2,000 calorie organic, 2,000 calorie per day organic diet is roughly like 5,000 a year. If you have 8 to 16,000 a year on bullshit that really doesn't do anything but provide sugar highs at best, alcohol, eating out with coworkers during lunch. I'm not even counting travel. You know, like a trip to Europe could be like easily like 3 to 5,000 or more for like 2 weeks. Dude, that's a whole year's supply of organic food that will give you great skin, lower incidence of cancer, all sorts of cancers, pretty much almost every single type of cancer. Allow your passive tissue to be healthier, like your ligaments, tendons, intervertebral discs. Allow your active tissue to be healthier, like all your muscle tissue. You're not going to have these like pimples all over your back and your face. Stuff of that sort will improve your digestion as well. You're not going to be like a walking cocktail of all sorts of toxins, because if the person's toxic load is high, their body almost creates more fat storage to get those toxins away from its visceral tissue and store it outside of its body. And then all of a sudden you got all these like stubborn pockets of fat and more fat being created. And you have the money, at least shop organic. You have the money even to buy a really good health coach, which is oftentimes way less than $8,000 to $16,000 a year. There are some that are way more than that. Do I think they're worth it? Probably most of them aren't worth that much more. You know, you can still get good information from someone charging you like half of that for really good coaching. And indirectly and directly, that would benefit the person so much more than another trip to Europe. And then they're back working their job that they hate for the boss that they can't stand. And then they're like, oh, I don't have money for organic food or a coach, but all of a sudden I have money for this new iPhone and, you know, order whatever, my food delivered and subscription services just to numb myself out, because I foolishly believe that materialism is really going to make me happy somehow. Where it's like, dude, it's not. You know, there's a certain base mark. Sure, you need like a house, you know, you probably need a car in certain situations. And but after that, it's like there's diminishing returns on what's really going to make you kind of like happy and bring you fulfillment. And oftentimes, if you're seeking fulfillment externally, you're going to be looking for a really long time, and you're going to be disappointed most of the time, I guarantee you as well. Arthur, I know you've retired. You probably don't even want to deal with people. I don't even blame you, because most people just live like such a gross lifestyle with ridiculous belief systems that are only hurting them and people around them. But I really do think like you would make a great coach, you know?
Yep.
I mean, on his journey yourself, and it could be like a cool part-time hobby for you. You don't even need to do it full-time or anything of that sort.
Thanks.
But I think you can make a huge difference in a lot of people's lives for the better, and showing what healthcare really looks like, you know, and what an honest journey, what an honest health journey actually looks like. Because all males can look like you and feel like you at 60. You don't have to be the 1 in 1,000, 1 in 2,000 probably. So rare, it's like almost lottery winning basically. It's just sad not to see that. It's sad for people to really believe like they need to be on a whole bunch of like medical shit, and their best hope is to get these 5-minute assessments from their MD and then given medical drugs, and oh, it's because of my age. Oh no, it's not because I'm only sleeping 4 hours a day, working a job I hate, overworking myself, eating a shitty diet. That has nothing to do with it. It's just my age.
Yeah.
Of course. The level of cognitive dissonance and level of delusion is dissociation as well is pretty ridiculous in most males that I see.
Those are the paradigms that need to be broken down, you know, and I really feel for people who are caught up in them, especially the one, oh, it's my age, but also the ones that are, if you're trapped in a job you hate or a relationship you hate, the amount of harmful chemicals that releases in your body is it's shocking. You are slowly poisoning yourself with your hate and your sadness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and sometimes I hear people say like, oh, well, first of all, if you quit your job and imagine if you're making X amount of money doing something you hate, imagine how much money you'd be making actually doing something you love. First and foremost, if money is a motivator for you. Sometimes I hear people say too, like, oh, I can't give up my lifestyle and take a pay cut, for example, although they don't have to take a pay cut oftentimes. I'm like, dude, what kind of lifestyle are you talking about? You're overworked. You have like a pretty cool house, but you're like never there because you're working all day. When you are there, you can't even mentally enjoy it because you're stressed by the next deadline or some employee or coworker that's not doing their part, or like a boss you hate. You can't even like consciously enjoy it because first of all, you're thinking about not wanting to go to work on your drive to work. You hate being at work. Then you're thinking about how much you hated being at work, driving all the way home. You bring that home and you just think about it all day. Then you rinse and repeat. I mean, you're overweight. You're on a bunch of medical drugs. You look very poor, not poor in the sense of financial poor, just like very poor health, et cetera, et cetera. And what kind of quality are you talking about? They're like deluded, some kind of like crazy corporate brainwashing going on. Like, for example, like if you feel like shit, but at least you have a house and like a nice car, you're somehow successful, or you know what you're doing. I say, like, if you're not happy, if you're very physically ill, you don't know what you're doing. Your path in life is wrong. Your belief system is not helping you at all. And a lot of times people are like, well, I have kids and stuff of that sort. I'm like, hello, 80% of what kids learn from you is just by observing you. So they see you being overweight, not taking care of yourself on all this medical shit, overworking yourself, putting materialism ahead of your mental and physical well-being. Guess what they're going to do? They're going to do exactly the same thing. And if you're miserable, what do you think is going to happen to your kids? Same exact thing. I just don't understand their thinking process. And oftentimes they might be actually like competent in their career and have a bunch of degrees. But I'm like, dude, talk about like being really good in one area and completely oblivious in all other aspects of your life, you know?
Yeah.
So anyways, Arthur, it was great talking to you. I think you're like you have the potential to be like a true, honest health professional.
Thank you.
You don't have to do it. Might be something you don't want to do because you're retired. You can actually enjoy your time off now and just really focus on enjoying life to the fullest. But I think you can make a huge difference with your story and your experience. And I appreciate you being on the show.
Thank you so much. That's great.
Thanks for everyone. Have a good weekend, everyone.
Take care.
Thanks for tuning into the podcast. If you've ever had trouble losing weight, or you've lost weight, but still didn't have the ideal body or health you're aiming for, please feel free to reach out anytime and book an assessment. Eugene will work with you to cover your goals in detail, see what's holding you back, and go from there. In the meantime, feel free to check out the countless testimonials on Eugene's website in the link below. In the testimonial section, you'll notice everyone has various backgrounds, are of all different ages, and all have had different challenges in their life, but they all have one thing in common: they were all able to find their health and achieve their ideal body. You're also welcome to add yourself to the Facebook group in the link below. There you'll have access to the live videos that Eugene does weekly on Sundays, and other helpful content. Thank you again for tuning in.